was them taking a look at their HEROES Act and like changing it up and passing that. And it was great. And then we heard that Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Secretary Mnuchin were like in negotiations, and that was great. And then Trump left the hospital and tweeted that there would be no more negotiations. And Senate Majority Leader McConnell said there would be no more negotiations. And so it's very frustrating for the millionth week in a row to tell you all that it seems as though there will not be a fourth stimulus bill before this election. And that has real absolute impacts to our sector, and is going to be a problem. We have a congressional delegation that absolutely supports a fourth stimulus bill. So this is where it's also really tricky. It's not like we can write to our member of Congress and say, why didn't you support this stimulus bill? They did. But that's where we are. So here's my silver lining and the thing that is keeping my optimism up. And I said this last week on the call, but I think it's important to repeat. Within this skinny, I've listed out a number of provisions that were included in this like House skinny bill. And these are all the provisions that I saw that could potentially impact our sector. There is more money allocated to the NEA, NEH, and IMLS in this relief plan than we've seen before. There's a significant amount of state and local aid. There's extension of the pandemic unemployment assistance. There's actually a provision to support mixed earners of W-2s and 1099s. There'd be a second round of PPP with nonprofits over 500 employees are eligible. And I mean, the list goes on. There are many of these provisions that we in the sector have been advocating for and pushing for through things like the Save Our Stages Act, the CREATE Act, conversations that we've been having with the nonprofit councils around unemployment and forgiveness. And so this to me is also a document of what happens when we get engaged and tell our elected officials what we need. So that is my silver lining, is that advocacy does work, and the fact that these things were included does mean something. That's what I got for us today in terms of the federal update. So could we move to the next slide? Is it going to do that cool animation thing? It is! So then when we look at the state, so let's talk about the fiscal year 21 budget. I think I mentioned 2 weeks ago that there was a revenue hearing that the joint chairs of the joint chairs of the Ways and Means Committee, which is both the House and the Senate Ways and Means Committee, along with Secretary Heffernan, who's Secretary of Administration and Finance for Governor Baker, held a hearing where they heard from several economist think tanks, tax revenue think tanks, and tax experts, as well as the head of revenue for the state and the state treasurer. And these were a couple of sort of pull quotes that I wanted to talk about. So the fun part is that none of those folks could agree on a singular number in terms of what the forecasts were going to be for revenue, but they see a range in terms of what kind of decline we're going to see in fiscal year 21, between $2 and $5 billion. That's a lot, but I just want to point out we do have a rainy day fund of like $3.5 billion, and that was. This goes to the next quote, which is from Chair Aaron Michaelwitz, who represents the North End and parts of Boston, that there's going to be difficult decisions and that there are a lot of options out there that they're considering at the moment. Heffernan made it clear that the Baker administration isn't interested in increasing any taxes, which would be an option. So basically, this week it's not going to be great. It's not going to be as bad as we originally thought, right? When they did this first hearing in April, and it was like, everything's going to be awful forever. It's gotten a little bit better. But I think we need to brace ourselves that we're going to see that those state revenue declines is going to have a real impact on whatever the legislature does for a fiscal year 21 budget and a fiscal year 22 budget. And the big thing, and I feel like a little bit of a broken record, so I hope you take it with the grace and patience that I do, is that, we still don't have a fiscal year 21 full budget, right? It's got a 3-month spending plan that's supposed to end on October 31st. And I think when that happened, the hope is that the feds would have kicked in some sort of state or local aid by now. Well, now we know that's not going to happen until after the election, which means that we're probably not going to see a full fiscal year 21 budget by October 31st. Again, we're all guessing here, but that's probably the reality we need to hit. So what happens, right? So I think this is also like the many timelines we could be living in, right? So depending on what happens with the election, if there's a united government on the federal level, there's the reality that we might see a relief package sort of move much quicker. If we're going to see a continued divided government where there's one party controls the House and one party controls the Senate, there will probably be more room for negotiation around this. And then if there's a united government from another perspective, I think we're going to continue to see a lot of gridlock. So that's what's happening. The other thing, and so as a result, I think then that's going to impact what decisions and what levers our state leaders have in terms of this conversation. I mean, obviously they're not going to wait. They can't wait forever to pass some sort of spending plan for the continuing months. But how they do that and what the sort of timeline is going to be is still up in the air. So then reopening, phase 3, step 2 questions. I want to just say, I really appreciate those of you who had questions or asked for further clarification and took me up on the offer to share that with me. We're putting together, I'm bundling it now, a letter to send to some of our contacts within the administration and reopening group to just say, here are the places where we're finding across this Commonwealth and across the sector that we could use a little bit more clarity. Or that we are asking for this instead of that. This doesn't mean that necessarily we'll get it, but I think the more we're able to sort of share these united concerns and questions, the better it is for all of us. I'm gonna, if you'll allow me, Pascal. Okay. If you'll allow me to answer this question, Pascal, that I'm seeing in the chat, maybe I must understand, but the latest stuff, technical term out of DC, is that a larger number is now back on the burner. Do you mean a larger number of relief packages? Yeah, no, it's on the backest burner we got, right? So the point is that skinny bill that the House passed included a lot of things that we wanted to see. And I think my point is that many of the provisions that parts of our sector across the country have been asking for and advocating for were included. And that's the result of advocacy and raising our voice and connecting with our elected officials. That's how that happens. But just to be clear, I don't have much hope, if any, that we will see any sort of a relief bill before the election. And I want to raise this point, regardless of what happens after the election, we will need to continue that advocacy because there will be yet again another fourth stimulus bill version, and we want to make sure all those provisions are included. But yeah, I think that might be, sorry, I'm responding to the chat box. Yes, I think the fact of the matter is we're seeing a lot of churn happening on the federal level. The conversations that I'm having with government affairs folks who are in DC is that we should not expect that something will be in place before November 3rd. So I'm going to move on and talk for a couple minutes about creating the vote. So these are some of the same messages I shared 2 weeks ago. So who's got a voting plan? Who knows what they're doing? Are they ready to go? I'm seeing Pascal raise her hand. Yes, I'm seeing hands raised. I'm seeing thumbs up. I love it. The other thing that I would say is that it is great to have a voting plan. And I had the pleasure of being on a call with some of the folks from the Mass Live Events Coalition earlier today. And we were talking about, it's not just enough to have a voting plan, but to know who's on your ballot. And this, I think a lot of our energy and attention and focus has been on the federal level, but there are elections happening on the local level too, and those really matter in terms of it implementing the policies that are going to affect us in our everyday life. So be sure to check out. I have a link on this to you can find your ballot and you can see who's on it. And then the other thing is if any of you are still getting calls, texts, or knocks on the door, although if you are getting knocks on the door, tell them to take 6 feet back, about asking for your support for a candidate. Here are 3 questions I would highly recommend you ask them. What's your candidate's cultural policy platform? How does the candidate see arts and culture playing a role to advance their top campaign priorities? And how will the candidate address the crisis creative workers and the cultural community currently face as a result of COVID-19? I will be honest with you, I suspect if you're talking with a volunteer, or someone, a lower level staff person who's doing those calls or those texts, their answer is probably going to be, I don't know. And that's okay, actually. If they say, I don't know, say, that's great. We'd really love to hear, I'd really love to hear back from you when you hear from the campaign. The more that campaign managers and candidates hear from the grassroots and from the folks they're trying to get to vote for them, that these are priorities for them, the more likely it is that they are going to come up with a cultural policy platform. So that's an important part of this process too. Then I also want to remind you of ways that if you are particularly motivated, and I don't know if Audrey's on this call, but I saw a great text earlier today where she was talking about how it's not just enough to like a post. This is the time where we need to get out and volunteer. And so there are a couple ways you can do that. You can be a poll worker. We know that there's still a need out there. And this year, unlike other years, because of the pandemic in Massachusetts, you can be a poll worker in another community. So if you live in Waltham and they say, we don't need any, you can go to Watertown. Just move to another W town, I guess. And then the other thing is that you can phone bank with Mass Vote to get the vote out and make sure that folks have their voting plans. And then finally, please continue to pledge to create the vote over here with us at the MassCreative and the Create the Vote Coalition. I think that's it for right now. I will now just, let's see. Deborah Cash already voted and it felt great. Let us all applaud Deborah. I love it. Okay, thank you. Thanks for the time. Oh, and so did Ron Malice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. And I think you'll be here for a little bit. So if people have questions, please continue to put them in the chat and Emily will do her best to answer them as they come along. I'm going to move on to Nida and Liz to talk a little bit about the BCC grant. And take it away, Liz. I'll do your slides. So just tell me next slide.
Hello, everyone. My name is Liz. I'm the office coordinator for MOAC. So we will be talking about the Boston Cultural Council and going through the 6 questions at the end of the application that we're really interested about. Today we will discuss grant eligibility, grant funding categories, fiscal sponsor, budget template, becoming a city vendor, and vendor portal. Next slide, please. What is the BCC? The BCC is our local cultural council. Money funnels down from Mass Cultural Council and the city provides a match. We changed our funding strategy last year to only fund to organizations with annual budgets under $2 million. Organizations will now fall under different categories depending on their budget size, and all grantees within a specific budget category will receive the same amount of funding. We will later go on into more information as to why we did that. Next slide, please. Boston Creates. So a lot of you may already know that's our cultural plan in which we try to align all of the work our office does just to keep us equitably grounded. The cultural planning process started back in April 2015. that entailed 3 town hall meetings, 118 community conversations, 35 stakeholder focus groups, and 50 one-on-one interviews, a creative engagement and participation survey in 4 languages, and an online crowdsourced map of cultural assets. This is a 10-year plan. We ended year 4 this past June of implementing the plan. Time flies. So we're still super excited about continue to implement this plan. Next slide, please. What we heard. So 5 goals came out of what we heard, and it was create fertile ground for a vibrant and sustainable arts and cultural ecosystem, keep artists in Boston and attract new ones here, recognizing and supporting artists' essential contribution to creating and maintaining a thriving, healthy, and innovative city. Cultivate a city where all cultural tradition and expressions are respected, promoted, and equitably resourced, and where opportunities to engage with arts and culture are accessible to all. Integrate arts and culture into all aspects of civic life, inspiring all Bostonians to value, practice, and reap the benefits of creativity in their individual lives and in their communities. Mobilize likely and unlikely partners, collaborating across institutions and sectors to generate excitement about and demand resources for Boston arts and culture sector. Excuse me. Next slide, please. So now we go into why the shift to fund smaller organizations. So 537 arts organizations in the city that could be identified through the CDP and IRS data. 302 of these organizations, which made up 56%, had annual budget sizes smaller than $25,000. Based on the CDP categories, 74% of these small orgs had a budget size of $250,000 or less. 250,000 to 100,000 made up 12%, and large orgs 1 to 10 million made 10%. Budget sizes of 10 plus million, only 3%. So this means our small and mid-sized orgs receive less support and are creating a great equitable dent into the arts ecosystem. You can find more information about this data on our site where you can locate the application link, which we'll go over on in a few slides. Next slide, please. So this is the grant funding categories. Organization budgets less than 100,000 are eligible grant of 2,000, 100,000 to 500,000 is 3,500, 500,000 to 2 million. 5 organizations will be awarded $5,000. So everyone will be basically receiving the same amount depending on where your organization budget falls under. Next slide, please. And these are the art disciplines that we are funding: music, film, video, folk and traditional art, visual art, theater, dance, humanities, literary arts, performance or time-based arts, social and civic practices, and multidisciplinary arts. Next slide, please. So eligibility. So the eligibility is nonprofit culture organizations with budgets under 2 million, whose mission programming is focused in the following disciplines, the ones that I just named. Nonprofits whose mission is not primary arts and cultural based, yet are looking to fund arts and cultural programs are eligible to apply also. Organizations not based in the city of Boston, with primary programming that takes place in Boston are eligible to apply. Unincorporated groups can apply with a fiscal sponsor as long as they meet the rest of the eligibility criteria. This can include artist collectives, volunteer groups, or publications. Organizations can submit only 1 proposal per funding cycle, please. Nonprofits with L3C designations are eligible to apply as well. Next slide, please. And grant fund restrictions. So there's some restrictions. Salaries or stipends for employees of a school system, library, parks department, municipal agency, or municipality. Capital expenditures for school, libraries, or other municipal agencies, programming that discriminates or discourages participation on the basis of race, gender, religious, creed, color, national origin, ancestry, disability, sexual orientation, or age. For the FY20 K-12 schools, K-12 school foundations, and Main Street organizations are not eligible to apply. Next slide, please. If you're not a 501c3, we would suggest for you to look up a fiscal sponsor or nonprofits whose missions are similar to yours. We provide this fiscal sponsor directory that you can search. The directory you can search by state, service category. You could do keywords for nonprofits. Profiles include eligibility requirements. It'll talk about fees, services, what types of projects are supported. And also within the site, you can look up statistics and resources on fiscal sponsorship. We also gave the grantspace.org because when I first started in this role, I was a little confused about fiscal sponsorship. And I started using GrantSpace, and it talks about what it means, how your organization can really benefit from it. So it's a really good resource. Next slide, please. And then I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague, Naida Faria.
Hello, everyone. I'm Naida Faria. I'm the Director of Administration and Finance. So we're going to go over the supplier portal. So the supplier portal is the city's one-stop shop for submitting bids, signing contracts, setting up ACH and direct deposit. And you can also add and change your contact information. And this would apply across all city programs with the exception of Boston Public Health Commission, Boston Water and Sewer, and the BPDA. Next. Next. Oh, I think you skipped one, or maybe not. Yes. So the supplier portal, the city issues a 10-digit number to each organization, company, individual called the vendor ID. So basically, this is like your social security to get in our system to identify you. With this vendor ID, you can use it across all the programs for granting purposes, for bidding, for our request for proposals. And again, you can use it across for all city departments. And basically, when you apply for a grant, we ask that you put this in your application, and this is what we use to issue the payments. In the past, we had like issue where, you know, people miss a digit or they had somebody else. We need to know because the ID, everything, payments are electronic, so we use the ID in order to issue the payment. So whatever information you have on the ID is where the payment is gonna go. And then, you know, it's important for organizations and individuals to refresh their vendor ID profiles. Sometimes, like the system been up since 1996, and I have seen information that old, or sometimes staff leaves and, you know, there's nobody to access the account. So there's ways to get around that. And Pascal, if you click next. So these are helpful links. So for those of you who don't have a vendor account, there are kind of like how-to guides on our procurement page. So these are the links to, even if somebody leaves your organization and you don't have access to like the password, you can create a user ID for an assistant account. So there's no need to duplicate the vendor ID. There's also, you can go back, and I've been emailing this to a lot of our vendors that our mail is not reliable. So we recommend that people sign up for ACH and direct deposit because one, you will get it earlier, usually between Tuesday and Thursdays versus, you know, getting a paper check mail out on Friday. which will take a couple days to get to your destination. So we recommend that people sign up for ACH, and you can do that just by clicking on the link and updating your information. And then if there is a vendor help desk that is located within our procurement department, and you can email them any questions. Most of the things you can do with the self-help guides, but if there's something that you change your name or you're doing business as another name, you can always email the vendor questions and they're able to change that information for you. Next. And I pass it back to Liz.
Thank you, Naida. So there were 2 questions on the chat. Oh, you're so very welcome for the data. The 2 million threshold is based on your current budget, so this year's budget. And then someone wanted clarity on the dates of funding cycle, so you have a year from when you're awarded. And then we'll go into the timeline. So the application opened on October 1st, so last week, and applications will be closing on November 16. Application review, thank you for your patience. We will be in touch no later than January 15th. If by any reason your application gets denied, you can ask us to consider to re-review your application if we violated any process within the grant cycle or any guidelines. You have 2 weeks to submit your request in writing. And then once the council re-reviews that, we would contact you and let you know our decision. Payment, how long does it take to get paid? If you are awarded, you will receive instructions about how to get paid. NIDA is your girl for that. Once we have your complete payment materials, it would take us about a month to disperse your check. And we really stress to please sign up for ACH. It's quick, easy. We won't lose the check. We don't have to reissue the check. It'll go straight into your account. Next slide, please. And Pascal, can you click on the application link, please? So the application, this is our webpage on City of Boston, where you can find all the information that we just went over. Pascal, can you scroll down? I'm sorry. It talks about the deadline, it talks about funding strategies, and then if you can scroll up a little, Pascal, up in the top where it says downloads, there you can find new funding strategy and a little bit more about the data that I just went over previously. Pascal, can you click on apply for Boston Cultural Council grant? Thank you. So this is how the application looks. Once you click on that link, it will go over about the Boston Cultural Council, Boston Cultural Council equity statement, the funding strategies that we went over, grant guidelines, grant categories. It will restate the eligibility requirements, grant fund restrictions, application forms and submissions, and again, application deadline. You can scroll down, and then you do have to create an account with Submittable. Once you create the account, then you would go into what the application looks like. Pascal, do you have an account? Can you click, I have an account, please? So once you log into your account, then it gives you access to all the questions. So you would go in and type in the name of your organization website, social media handles. Please provide those so we can follow you and we can see and share the current work that you're currently doing, contact person. And then we have little blurbs on the side to just remind you, the contact person should be the person that will be in charge of any questions that we may have pertaining to the application, the person that we would contact if we need an updated address or anything when it comes to payments. Can you scroll down, please? Then here, what is your organization type? If you are a 501c3 nonprofit, you would just input your information. Other nonprofit organization, the same. It changes a little bit once you click on fiscally sponsored. It's going to ask your fiscal sponsor's information. So you would have to get that from your fiscal sponsor. You keep scrolling down. Then it will ask you some, who exactly are you serving? What best describes your organization? What discipline? And then if your organization is located in Boston, if you say yes, it'll continue showing you the questions. If you say no, then we would ask you where are you currently located, and if your programming is in Boston. And if it is in Boston, then it'll continue into more of the questions. If it's not in Boston, the application will stop there. It won't allow you to continue. So then it asks you, do you pay artists directly? Total grant amount you're requesting, that's based on your budget. We're gonna go over a little bit the budget template that we provided, but if you do have a budget template already created, and if you did apply for the COVID-19 fund from our office, you can just provide that budget template. You don't have to use this template. We only provided it as a way to show you what it may look like. So if you continue scrolling down, then if you keep scrolling down, these were the six questions that we're going to go over a little bit today. These 6 questions is for us to better understand your thinking, areas where your organization is thriving and where you feel like there are opportunities to grow. We want to hear your plans, ideas, even if it's something hasn't been put into practice yet. We just want to learn a little more so we can kind of tailor on how we're providing these grants to your organizations. So the first question is, in what ways does your organization expand access to arts and culture for Boston's diverse audiences? We did put a little blurb in there. For those who have engaged in virtual programming, this can also be a place to share what you have learned about who you're reaching or not reaching digitally. We really want to know a little bit about that. In what ways does your organization present a unique artistic or cultural perspective? This can include focusing on a specific discipline or kind of artistry, the way your organization approaches its work, who you engage through your work. The next question is, what ways does your organization address a community need or empower the community through arts and culture? A community can be a neighborhood, a specific population, a culture scene, people in a specific discipline. Please be specific about who you think as your community. What relevant experience and qualifications do your leadership and staff have for working in the communities you serve? If your audience is citywide or beyond, please include information on how your leadership and staff reflect the diversity of Boston. What measures does your organization take to serve constituents with different abilities? How is your organization prioritizing cultural diversity, economic diversity, inclusion, and equity? So those were the 6 questions that we tailored a bit this year because we really want to learn on how we can better support you. If anyone has any questions, you can please. So someone said, for contact information, do you want the legal address? Oh, NIDA responded. For contact information, Phone, do you want the legal address and phone number, or do you want how to reach us while we are out of the office during the pandemic? The phone and information that we can reach you while working remotely. So that is a little bit about the application. So this is what the budget template looks like. There is a link on the application, but this is just a print screen of what it looks like. So we really want to know what your current organization budget is, current year to date actuals, and then previous fiscal year's budget. So your previous fiscal year budget and actuals for last year. And again, we know that your budget may look a little different, well, a lot different because of COVID-19, and that is okay. Next slide, please. And this is just another, the bottom of the template. And then we prefer to have our proposals submitted online, but there is handwritten hard copies available at City Hall. And we are accepting them as well. There's a little box located on the 8th floor in room 802, right in front of the door that you can drop your application. And there's also hard copies there starting this Tuesday that you can pass by to pick it up. Next, okay, and then here is my contact information and NIDA's contact information. Also in that page where you can find the application link, there's a Calendly link that you can sign up for office hours. If you have any questions or any concerns, anything, you can email us. You can sign up for an office hour if you want me to go over the application with you, or the template, or to take a look at, or anything. If you can't access, let's say, your application that you submitted for the COVID fund in your submittable, you can send me an email and I can download the application and send it over to you. Anything that you need, we're trying to make it as easy and as accessible to you. Next slide, please. And then I wanted to go over a little bit, what is the Opportunity Fund in an Artist Resource Desk? So a lot of you may know the Opportunity Fund is a grant for artists. It provides grants up to $2,000 to support individual artists, increase access to the arts and local arts events. We have an Artist Resource Desk, which is managed by our Artist Resource Desk Manager, Julia Ryan, where you can find about resources, need help in finding space, selling your art, any questions regarding applying to the artist certification or anything, she is available to help you with that. Next slide, please. And then if you guys have any questions, we're here for you.
Thank you, Liz. I think so far the questions in the chat have been answered, but if there are any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask at this time. Awesome. Well, I think we may have answered everyone's questions. Well, thank you all so much for coming and joining us today. If you do have any questions after today's meeting, please feel free to email me through the recap email you'll be receiving very shortly, which will include this PowerPoint. Please expect the recording of this meeting to go up sometime next week, probably middle of the week, since we do have a long weekend due to Indigenous Peoples Day on Monday. As a reminder, we will not be meeting next week since we have moved to a bi-weekly schedule. We'll be meeting the week after. So just something to be mindful of. I think I see a hand. Is it Ron? Do you have a question, Ron? Oh, great. Just wanted to be sure. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. Please feel free to send any other questions or concerns to me, and I'll be happy to field them to Liz, Nida, or Emily if you need any other clarity. Have a great long weekend. Enjoy as much of the kind of last bit of summer, but it's really fall time that we have, and I'll see you all in 2 weeks. Stop sharing.